Today we're going to make an isometric drawing. An isometric drawing allows you to draw a three-dimensional shape using grid lines that are 120 degrees apart. When looking at a drawing, you first have to understand what the dimension types are, meaning height, width, or depth. When I'm looking at my front view, this view here, I'm looking at it has height and width. But if you look at it, it does not have depth, your front view. So each of our views has two of the three dimension types. So our front view has width and height. If we look at our top view, it has width and depth. Now if we look at our side view, we have depth and height. Now, when you look at those three different views, you're going to have to diagnose if it's a height or a width or a depth. But then, once you start drawing, you need to understand what grid line to follow. For anything that is a line that has height, you're going to follow the grid that goes vertical. Now, anything that has width, you're going to slant from the bottom right and slant in and up to the left. That is your width. Now, the opposite grid line, going up and towards the right, that is your depth. The top view that I have kind of shown here is your little cheat sheet. Now, let's try to apply it. So the first part that you do is looking at your isometric paper. You make a starting point. That is where all the lines converge and intersect in one point. That is my red dot there. That red dot's going to represent some part of my front view. I'm going to say it's this point here. Now, my first part is I'm going to draw this bottom line here. I want to draw from that dot there to the end dot here. I have to ask myself, looking at my cheat sheet in the top left, I see my front view can only be width or height. I have to ask myself, is this line height or width? If I look at it and I see this horizontal line here, it's showing width. Now, it says width of 4. After seeing that, I take a look at what grid line I follow for width, and I see it's the one that's slanting up and towards the left, and I'm going to count that 4. So when I start counting, I always start with 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that I've marked off, I'll use a straight edge and draw my line. Now, that bottom line is done. Now I want to move to the next line where I just put my red dots. I'm going to draw that line. Now looking at the front view still, I have to ask myself, is it a width or height? When I'm looking at that, I notice it is height. And by the looks of it, it says 2.5. So from that point, I look at where is my height grid line supposed to follow. It's supposed to go vertical according to that. So now, I'm going to count 2.5 up. So 0, 1, 2, half. When you get to halves and stuff, you're going to have to estimate where the halfway point is. After you get your lines marked off, use a straight edge and draw that line. Now, That line is done. And I'm going to move over to the line over here. Now, I ask myself, is it height, width, or depth? I look at my front view, could only be width and height. And it's the same as this one. So it's going to be a height. So it looks like it's 2.5. So I'll count up 0, 1, 2, half. And I'll use a straight edge and draw that line. Now that line's done. And now I'm going to go to the top line here. I could already see that it says width right above it, and it says 4. I take a look at what line, grid line to follow. It looks like it's the one slanted up and towards the left. And you could also just look at it and you could see that you should be able to connect those top two lines. But for the exercise, I'll take a look. I'll count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll be able to connect the line there with a straight edge. Notice when I did that, I stayed parallel to these points when I was at a half. So make sure you're staying parallel. What people often do is, without thinking, they go straight across. But you don't see that on any of the lines up there for the grid line. So make sure you don't go straight across. Now my front view is done. Now I want to move to my side view. When looking at my side view, the first thing you must understand is that this line here is the same line as that one there. So you don't have to redraw that one. That one's already done. But we can move to this bottom line here. So this line from here to here, we need to decide is it height, width, or depth. This line looks like the same line as this one here, and that says depth. So that one's depth, and it looks like it's 1.5. So following the depth line there, or the grid line, we're going to go up and slant towards the right. So we're going to count 1.5. So 0, 1, half. Use a straight edge, draw it across. Now we're going to go to the top line and do the same thing. You can see it's the same one. It's the depth of 1.5. So we're going to draw that from the point. Notice I'm staying parallel with my grid lines for depth. So 0, 1, half. Use a straight edge, draw that line. Now we have one more line to do, and that's this line there. If I look at that, you could see it is height. That height of 2.5. So you should be able to see that it connects, but for exercise reasons, we'll count 0, 1, 2, half. Use a straight edge, draw that line. Now we'll move to our top portion. And we need to understand on this one, just like the side view, that as you draw, you're going to start doubling up on lines. What I mean by that is this line here is this line. So we don't have to redraw that one. Same goes for this line. This line here is this line there. So we don't have to redraw it twice. So we only have 2 lines left to go. First, we'll start off with this line. Looking at the top view, you could see that it could only be width or depth. When looking at this line, it's the same as that one, meaning it is depth. So the same depth of 1.5. So when we go here, we'll go 1.5 again. Make sure you're staying parallel with the depth grid lines, and we'll count 0, 1, half. Use a straight edge, draw your line. Now we only got one line left, and that's the top line, this line here. And looking at this, you can see it's a width of 4. So using a straight edge and just counting, we'll count up. And we're following that same grid. So we'll count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Use a straight edge and finish off your three-dimensional shape. Now, the biggest part of this is understanding is a height, width, or depth, and what line or the grid to follow. Once you get that, it should be pretty straightforward. Make sure you're starting counting at 0. Don't start counting at 1.